Good morning, everybody. Good morning. Welcome. Please excuse the beeps while everybody's coming in. Welcome to another spring showcase. Today, we're excited to partner with Southern Water to find out how they've been using behavioural science to take a whole life approach to responsible water production and customer consumption. For anyone that doesn't know, my name is Chloe Tooth, and I'm the Knowledge and Communications Manager here at Spring Innovation. We are the Innovation Centre of Excellence for the water sector, supported by all water companies across the UK and Ireland, as well as the supply chain and academia. We're here with the goal of enabling collaboration, removing duplication, and accelerating innovation within the water sector. So we are the custodians of the Water Innovation Strategy 2050. For anyone who hasn't seen that document, we're going to be popping some links in the chat to that in a second. So this lives on our website. It's got 7 themes and with challenges that sit under those themes that we want to be solving within the sector. We also put out calls for innovation against those themes through our Spring Accelerators. So you can find out more about the current Spring Accelerator 3 programme on our website. And last week, Spring announced the 10 companies advancing to the Spring Accelerator 3 Exchange Pitch Day. So you'll find a list of companies, on the Spring LinkedIn. But today's service offering is about knowledge sharing. So we've got 2 aspects to that. The first being our knowledge library on the Spring platform, where there's a bank of over 60 case studies for you to go and learn from and utilise on innovation projects from across the sector, with over 160 more case studies currently in the pipeline. So this is constantly being updated, so please do go over, register and check that out, and there'll be a link to the chat for that also. The showcase recordings for a number of these projects and today's project and any supporting links or documentation also sit alongside those case studies. So if for any reason you have to leave today or you want to refer back to, the recording will be on our platform. So this is a 2-hour knowledge showcase event, and we're happy to see there's 173 people registered for today's event, with representatives from Australia, Hong Kong, Germany and New Zealand. So welcome to the call and thank you so much for joining us. Today's attendees can expect to learn more about behavioural science, ethnography, test and learn new ideas about what works for consumption reduction and pivoting when we learn what doesn't work, disaggregation of behaviours and holistic strategy around this project. So this is showcase number 23, and with over 2,800 people registered for these events, we're super happy and really proud of how these events are helping to disseminate knowledge across the sector. These showcases are about being able to learn a little bit about the project and then taking away those learnings and that knowledge and being able to try and embed those in your organisation. So this being said, we'll be launching a poll at the end of this showcase to find out how interesting you found the information and whether you're hoping to go away and use that afterwards. So please do submit your answers at the end of this event when that comes through. But on to today's session, I'm just going to quickly run through the agenda and introduce our speakers before I hand over to Loz to kick off this showcase. So firstly, I'm going to talk about the importance of knowledge sharing. So that's handing over to Lauren. We've got the context and value behind the project, the water scarcity challenge, interactive demonstration and examples. We're going to move on to the roadmap, have a short break into the lessons learnt with +X, and the lessons learnt with Southern Water, and then into a Q&A section at the end. So if you do have any questions throughout the session, please be popping those in the chat and we'll do our best to answer all of those as we go through. For any that we don't get around to answering today, we will pop those alongside the case study and the recording on our platform. So without further ado, I'm just going to introduce our speakers. So as I said before, we've got Lauren Tyler, the Head of Innovation at Southern Water. We've got Sasha Bagan, Innovation Lead at Southern Water. We've got Dorota Benecker, Innovation Lead at Southern Water. And we've got Ben Harrison, Innovation Programme Manager at +X. So Lauren, if you're available, I will pass over to you to kick off this showcase. Thank you.
Thanks, Chloe. Hi, everyone. Welcome to this exciting showcase this morning. I have worked with Spring, Carly and the team since its inception, and I'm an avid supporter of all that the Centre of Excellence is enabling through its knowledge sharing service. Taking the time to share what we know is difficult to put a pound sign to, but sometimes the most important things can't be measured. I want to thank Spring for hosting this session and reinforce the importance of events like these as we work to develop a learning culture across the water sector. a culture where we make space to ask questions and discuss ideas, a culture where we're quick to share successes and enable fast adoption with data and notes on scaling, a culture where we feel safe in sharing what didn't work and why, so that our peers don't waste time reaching the same dead end. I joined the water sector in 2019, and I've seen a material shift driven in part by our innovation community in the levels of collaboration and openness in pursuit of solving some of our sector's biggest challenges. And there are a lot of challenges ahead, water scarcity being one of them. The clicker doesn't work. Okay. There we go. I love this quote by organisational psychologist Adam Grant. Intelligence is traditionally viewed as the ability to think and learn, yet in a turbulent world, there's another set of cognitive skills that might matter more, the ability to rethink and unlearn. In the context of our showcase today, focused on consumption reduction through behaviour change, we need to rethink what we think we know about customer perceptions, customer behaviours and their motivations, and unlearn water as a utility when we know there are so many deeply personal and emotional associations with water. Giving a child a bath, downing a glass of water after a run, a hot shower after the commute home, and especially in Brighton, swimming in the sea. I hope you enjoy learning about the work the team have done. We're very proud of it, and I hope you learn a lot from what we have learned so far, but I think this is just the beginning of how we can use behavioural science across the water sector. So thank you for listening, and over to you, Sasha, Dorota and Ben.
Well, hi everyone, and thank you again for joining our Spring Innovation Showcase today. So today we want to share how we've taken what we see as a really unique approach to tackling one of the major challenges that we're facing, and that's the water scarcity challenge in the Southeast. So we're going to share how we've supported our water efficiency programme at Southern Water, which is called Target 100, to embed behavioural science, innovation and customer insight to help us create more effective solutions to solving this challenge. So the southeast of England is facing severe water shortages, and it's expected that we'll need an additional 1.1 billion litres per day over the next 30 years just to keep up with our current water demand. And these water shortages are driven by the effects of climate change, so such as heat waves and droughts, but also increasing population growth within our region. So we need to reduce the amount of water that's used every day, as well as the amount that's wasted through leaks, and that's another area we're innovating in. But we need to ensure there'll be enough water to go around in the future. So for the sector, water scarcity is a really known challenge, and water companies have the knowledge and the insight to be aware that water is becoming increasingly scarce, and we know the consequences for ourselves, our customers and the environment if we're not able to change how we all view and use water. But we also have a real curse of knowledge. It can be really easy to assume that absolutely everyone has the same level of insight, knowledge and especially motivation to use less water as those of us who work in the sector do. So for many, though, it seems almost impossible to believe that anywhere in the UK could possibly be running short of water. We live on an island, we're surrounded by water, it seems to rain incessantly in the UK. And this really reflects recent figures from our customers, which show that actually 85% of our customers don't believe water scarcity to currently be a problem. And actually only 27% believe it to be a problem in the future. So that view that everyone is really engaged and aware just isn't accurate. So we could easily assume that, we'll increase awareness of water scarcity and that's going to solve our challenge. But actually, this is only really part of the story. And when we asked a large sample of 2,000 people, how many litres do you think you use per day? Actually, 44% said they believe they use 0 to 20 litres, whereas our customers actually use an average of around 130 litres a day. So not only is water scarcity not a very well-known issue, actually many people are not really aware of how much water we all use every day. And if we don't know sort of how much water we're actually using and that it's actually a lot more than we are using, there isn't really that recognition that we need to change our behaviour, even if we become more aware of the problem of water scarcity itself. So really, we're faced with a big challenge. It isn't well known, it's not understood. So unfortunately, water use is not one broad sort of simple behaviour to be changed. And although our ultimate goal is water saving, actually water use is really multifaceted. And there are many different water use behaviours. So unfortunately, it's not as simple as telling our customers, just use less water and expecting them to kind of know how to do that. So what we need to acknowledge is the fact that people are so diverse. We all think, we all feel, and we're all motivated by very different things. So given that we know, humans are not robots and there's no one size fits all approach to changing behaviour, we have to understand that human behaviour it's complex, it's nuanced. So when we were facing this challenge, we knew we needed to actually pick apart this problem in more detail. And we wanted to understand, how are people actually behaving? What's driving those behaviours? And what would actually enable people perhaps to behave differently? So we believe that an understanding of behavioural science is absolutely fundamental to any behaviour change programme. Our best chance at enabling actual behaviour change really comes as a result of understanding behaviour and actually designing interventions that will guide different or perhaps better or healthier behaviours. So behavioural science relates to the study of human behaviour and how individuals think, feel and behave. And really it helps us to understand what people do and not just what they say they do. So by understanding true behaviour and then designing interventions to test how we might change that behaviour, we can be a lot more confident in what works. So we realised that if we wanted to make a dent in really solving this challenge, we needed to expand our expertise in this space. We also couldn't continue to rely on our own assumptions. We needed to learn, to test, to iterate, to know how we could actually have a real impact. So applying an understanding of behavioural science, it also means that we can utilise new tools and processes that can help to really guide us to actually understand the customers we're designing solutions for. So they really help us to actually ask ourselves, can people even do this thing that we're actually asking them to do? And so one tool that we can use to do this is called COM-B. And this is quite a well-known tool. Some of you might have heard of this before, but really it helps explain which sort of conditions are required for behaviour change to actually occur. And it provides a framework for understanding and exploring the barriers to behaviour change that audiences might face. So according to the COM-B model, for a behaviour to occur, an individual must have, firstly, the capability to do it. So they need to feel that they're both psychologically and physically able to do the behaviour. Secondly, they need to have external factors that provide an opportunity to do the behaviour. And third, they have to have the motivation to actually want or need to carry out that behaviour more than other competing behaviours. And interventions need to target one or more of these for a behaviour change to result. So we can actually use a bit of an example here. So say we wanted to encourage our customers to use less fresh water in their gardens. We could simply say, OK, we need more customers to buy a water butt and reuse water in the garden. But first, we need to really think about capability. So do people actually know why they should be reusing rainwater? Do people even know that water butts exist? Can they physically go to a store and buy one? Can they then install it? Can they then capture the water from the water butt into a watering can and actually use it to water their garden? And actually, when we think about perhaps more elderly or vulnerable customers, some people might actually really struggle to do this, so that capability might not be there. Secondly, we can think about the opportunity and actually whether the environment is right to enable the behaviour. So is it socially acceptable to have this in the garden? Is there even space in the garden, importantly? And actually, might using a water butt be more time intensive and more frustrating than using a hose or a sprinkler? And can customers even afford to buy a water butt, for example? And finally, motivation. So what would actually motivate customers to actually use and buy a water butt? And why would they continue doing this over, just continuing to use their hose pipe? So this model starts to actually, you can see how it really picks apart the actions that customers need to take. And it really helps us to understand the level of actual effort that's involved for customers. And I think you can see it's a lot more sort of complex than just saying, yeah, just go out and buy a water butt. So we can really use this model to actually identify barriers that might be inhibiting the behaviour. We then see our role as actually working out how do we remove those barriers to help make the positive behaviour a lot more likely to occur. And as a general rule with this model, communications can typically only influence the capability and motivation barriers. So opportunity barriers, for example, a lack of resources, tools and processes, they're unlikely to be influenced by, say, a communications campaign. So I think this model is really good as a bit of a reality check, really, to make sure that we're actually being really thorough and really realistic with our expectations of our customers.
Yes, so as design thinking practitioners, we also applied human-centered approach to the water efficiency challenge. When thinking about solutions, we asked how we might enable customers to use less water in a way that doesn't feel like a sacrifice on their side, so it doesn't impact their everyday experience, and that it feels easy. So customers have many competing needs, and water scarcity messages tend to over-index on the sort of environmental and functional needs, which are more rational and just generally distant. So assuming customers want to save the environment and want to save money. I think generally that kind of traditional way kind of forgets about the more symbolic needs, which are more emotional and more personal. So how we value family, how we value the certain lifestyle that we want to live, or even feeling clean. So also from another perspective, we wanted to think about the challenge as a commercial business might. So what if we were against the competition to solve it? How could we understand what works whilst keeping the costs down? And also, I guess, would doing things differently give us better results, as well as, most importantly, how can we learn quickly and course correct as we go? So get things out there. We also wanted to explore the art of the possible, so not play it safe and try some new and exciting things that people might want. So what that meant in practice for us? Well, we needed to learn a lot more about our customers, about the market, and about what works and what doesn't, and the best ways to get the solutions into our customers' hands. So when we started looking into the water efficiency challenge, we realized that there was a lot we didn't know about our customers. So before we could even think about designing solutions, we needed to understand the behaviors in depth in the real context through ethnography. So things like who our users are, what they're doing and why. So we could learn things like what people's gardens actually look like, understand the range of behaviors in the gardens that involve water use, that may be things that people do, like rinsing the side of the house to clean it and get rid of cobwebs and dust, is actually a lot more common than we even anticipated, that some people really like their cars to be very clean. I guess how much water in drought goes on watering plant pods, or that, and just how people think about the amount of water they use in the gardens in terms of volume, time, or even deciding when it's enough. So through that understanding, we built empathy with our customers' needs, and we also learned new unexpected insights that informed the solutions and how we could make them work. So we chose ethnography because we can't reliably get people to tell us what they do, like Sasha mentioned. So that qualitative research to kind of understand human behavior and culture is really important. We have to observe them in their real life, in their homes. And we did that through digital diaries and interviews. I'll talk about it in a minute in a bit more detail. But I guess the importance of ethnographic research is even more important with the rollout of smart meters, because we'll have access to all the data that will point us to opportunities where we can influence behavior. But we need that qualitative understanding of what people do and why and how. So it's the nuances that are so vital to designing solutions that work. So what we did with ethnography is we carried out ethnographic research for two types of purposes. So it was ethnography to explore, to empathize and identify opportunities, and also ethnography with purpose to uncover specific levers and buyers and inspire ideas. So for the garden space, we used the ethnography to explore because we knew very little about it, and we wanted to understand how people are using water in the gardens, and also awareness of their water use. So we carried out depth interviews to start with, just to paint a picture of the garden use, people's lifestyle, and gather information about the household. Once we had that, we kind of probed further with digital diaries. So over a course of a week, people were given exercises and submitted as photos, questions, videos of like certain activities we wanted them to do. They even drew maps of the gardens to reflect on their water use, and we also gathered information on the household behaviours and just kind of beginning to understand the triggers and barriers. And then we closed with depth interviews that really probed further into triggers and barriers that were coming up. What we learned is that we actually identified 10 opportunities for reducing water use in the garden, ranging from kind of inefficient behaviours to increasing people's connection with water as a precious resource. We got wealth of insight, we observed high water usage activities that we didn't even realise were as common or frequent. But we also understood that people want and need greater awareness of water consumption in the garden to be able to change behaviours. And whilst cost feels important, it's the ease and lifestyle that are really priorities for them, even if they don't necessarily realise it themselves. But for the bathrooms, we were a bit more familiar with the space. So we did kind of a bit of a shortcut, the ethnography with purpose. So it's not an impartial research report, but a behavioural science-led inspiration document aimed at highlighting barriers so you can find nudges to overcome them. We had a specific focus on shower in user and toilet leakages. So the approach was quite similar. It was a week of diary activities. So and then another week of probing further into reflections on the diary, household context, attitudes, and zooming into behaviours like shower routines and exploring leaks in the bathroom. But we didn't want to bias participants by revealing too much about what we wanted to learn, so we kept it broader about utilities, so gas, electricity, and water. And we explored the leaks by probing, for example, what needs fixing around the bathroom and attitudes to kind of getting things repaired, and just awareness also of leaky toilets. And then we closed it with depth interviews via Zoom to again kind of verify and probe further about the barriers and insight that came up. So from that kind of piece of research, we learned, we also kind of, after we had the insight document, we carried out idea generation sessions. So through the workshops, we identified 6 high impact feasibility nudges that we could trial for leaks and showers. And what kind of came up there was really just that we could design solutions to harness the power of recognition to encourage people to save water further. Also an opportunity for a key enabler, which is visualizing consumption. That is very difficult without smart metering. The importance of partnerships, for example, water and energy, to kind of increase the value of what we're asking people to do, and also obviously making it really easy with fixing leaky toilets. So the opportunity barriers that Sasha talked about. And what we did with the identified behaviors is we kind of like applied them through product, service, and communications. So on the next, yeah, thanks. So we had insight into how people are behaving and potential levers that we could apply. So we could start to understand what might work best to get people to use less water. Asking customers what they think of a campaign doesn't always tell you whether they will change their behavior, and they might have the best intentions, but there might be a kind of intention action gap stopping it happening. So and I guess what's more important also is that you can be successful in delivering a message but fail to deliver results. And qualitative approaches that we use so far, like focus groups, can be less reliable, and it's also really difficult to and slow to test multiple variants of messages. So rather than asking customers what they think, we tested the impact of different messages on an outcome with things like kind of probing into the nuance of different message attributes and how they influence awareness, emotions, perceptions, and essentially propensity to change behavior and purchase water efficiency products. So conveying a sense of magnitude to the problem is key to driving individuals to act. And a lever of frightening futures might work because it's highly emotive and people kind of remember it. But caution is needed to avoid backlash, because customers might remember the message, but when they feel guilted, it erodes trust. So how we tested the messages, we ran a randomized controlled trial with our partner DecTech. They are a specialist consumer decision-making agency, And they have a model for testing multiple message types to understand how they land, and we could use it in the absence of real-time meter information. So we were able to use that to screen ideas and better inform how we invest our money and time, essentially. So we first ran idea generation workshops, and then we designed the online experiment based on 2,000 nationally representative sample of people in the scenario of kind of imagine you're getting an email message. And the behavioral algorithm predicts the message effects on propensity to change behavior, essentially. So it gave us insight into the counterintuitive nuances of people's behavior. And it also gave us the scale. We were able to test multiple combinations of 26 message attributes and 7 purchasing choices. And another important aspect of our approach was product trials. So products can facilitate behavior change and enable that great customer experience. So once we identified new and exciting products that we could help customers save water, we needed to validate their potential to do that actually in real life, whether the water saving benefit would stand. And we also wanted to understand how much water saving is feasible from affecting a particular behavior we wanted to change. So a default way to measure water saving in the sector were the before and after meters. But we wanted to use disaggregation of measurement. So really kind of measure the granular specific behavior that we wanted to affect, like using a flash counter to measure a reduction in toilet flushes rather than comparing the before and after meters, to just really enable us to narrow on the exact behavior we wanted to affect. But often we also wanted to learn more about the customer experience to ensure that positive and kind of learning about customers' unmet needs. So trials enabled us to learn about what matters most and optimize the product or service. And for example, with the hose flow monitor trial, basically measuring, installing a device that measures flow of water through the hose and kind of using the principle of, will customers seeing how much water they use, will that have real feedback, real effect on the water reduction in real time? Even though the data wasn't reliable because we had some unusual weather conditions in the trial, it really highlighted that people really valued kind of seeing how much water they were using in the gardens. So that kind of the main barrier that we identified at Inside, which is the lack of awareness, was really heightened there. Oh yeah, one more slide. Yeah, the final toolkit in our approach was also expert audit. So we worked with an expert agency to audit past comms and identify opportunities to optimize using behavioral science, find opportunities where we are unintentionally switching customers off, or where our message was having the opposite effect. So our embedded bias, like using kind of people in photos that were away from the call to action, so actually stealing the attention, or using images that were using, there was a lot of water running when we were asking people to save water. And we developed a playbook to help guide our comms in the future so that we could embed behavioral science a lot easier. So things like, can you understand the message before people lose focus? Are we driving their attention to the expected behavior that we want to change? And how appealing it is to their local kind of community, social identity, environment, and also making sure that the visuals amplify the message and not confuse it.
Okay, so our work on the programme so far, as Dorothea's going to talk through, it's been really broad and really varied. So in general, what kind of ties it all together, I think, is applying a really human-centred lens to actually tackling the challenge, and really digging deeper into what we think are the assumptions that we've always had about our customers. So we've used an approach that enables us to really identify and validate our assumptions that help us design solutions that better meet user needs. So this starts with the initial premise that absolutely everything is an assumption until we validated it. And I think we need to be a lot bolder in actually identifying when we might be basing decisions on assumptions, and then taking the time and effort to validate them. As you know, kind of experts that work in the sector, it can be really easy to think we know something is true, but I think we really need to be questioning a lot more. Do we know that is true? Do we really have the evidence there? So we've developed a sort of 4-step diagram that really outlines that approach in a bit more detail, and it enables us to really explore and then test our assumptions. So firstly, it's identifying an assumption, and we believe that's anything that we don't yet have evidence for. So for example, the assumption that teenagers spend longer in the shower than adults, really good hunch, it's probably true, but it's definitely an assumption until we've validated it. So the second step is to really question everything, pull the assumption apart, open the can of worms, ask the difficult questions, really start to think, well, what if it wasn't true? What's the other alternative? And really call out what we don't yet know. The third step is really learning and pivoting. So learning using insight and human-centered methods, for example, ethnography, or trying to understand, how can we learn what customers do and not what they say they do? How can we do that really objectively? So we want to find out what people actually do and then get some evidence for our assumptions. And I think this is the point in the process where it really feels like, again, we've opened the can of worms. We now have this big mess to try and piece together. But we really do feel it's better spending the time to really go through the process and getting things right, rather than designing a solution on one of our assumptions that might not actually work in the long run, where we've then invested time, money, and effort in perhaps solving the wrong challenge. The fourth step is to really act on the insight and design better solutions. And really, we're trying to then break down the barriers that we have in achieving the behaviour that we want to encourage. So I think the key feature really of this is actually where we go after point one. And as I said before, it can be really easy just to start designing solutions from there. But it is really important to go sort of further through the process, really dig deeper. It's really worth taking the time and effort to do that. And also to constantly revisit the process to really stay up to date with our assumptions and knowledge. Things change so quickly, they change all the time. So really staying up to date and keep checking in with the process. So we're going to walk through some examples of this approach in practice now. But before we do, we wanted to give you all a bit of a chance to guess some of the answers to the questions we looked at for a quick poll. Brilliant. So we'll put you out of your misery now with some of these. I think some of them might be right. I'm not sure. I can't see the poll at the moment. But yeah, so our very first assumption then was that we previously assumed that the more tips that we could give our customers on water saving, the better, the more the merrier. But we knew from the behavioural science literature that actually when we give people too much choice, it can actually be really overwhelming. And actually having an abundance of options can actually make it a lot more difficult to make a decision. It requires a lot more sort of cognitive effort. So actually when people are presented with too many choices, a lot of the time they just won't choose any at all. And some of you might be familiar with a book called The Paradox of Choice and some consumer experiments that actually with sort of shoppers that found that people are actually a lot more likely to make a purchase when they're presented with fewer options rather than an abundance of options. So working with expert behavioural scientists from Concentrics, we received feedback on some of our communications that actually customers can only process about 3 to 5 pieces of information at a time. So well done anyone that got that right. So actually, rather than expecting our customers to really trawl through endless tips and then find the ones that apply to them, we need to really make it a lot easier for our customers and be a lot more targeted. So we actually help customers get to those relevant tips a lot more quickly. So we really need to design for short attention spans. So the second assumption, it was a bit of a trick question, it's a little bit of a controversial one as well, is that water efficient shower heads use less water. So water efficient shower heads, they've been around for a long time. They're actually one of the key tools that we give out to customers during our home and business audits. So we knew that water saving shower heads use less water in terms of litres per minute. But what we needed to really check and validate is whether actually would customer behaviour impact this in a real world setting. So we actually have a staff product testing group at Southern Water, so we can ask our staff to trial products for us and give us really honest feedback. So we asked this group to trial this for us to find this out. So we gave participants a smart shower timer from a company called Aguardio. And it's a really good tool because it automatically measures shower duration. So people don't actually have to self-report and write down their shower time. So it's a lot more objective. So we then asked participants to shower for 2 weeks with the timer gathering their shower data as a baseline with their existing shower heads, so the one they've always had. We then asked them to install a water efficient shower head and then measure their shower duration for a further 2 weeks. And what we found is that shower time actually increased. And this was good feedback on the shower head actually from Methem, the one we used, that actually people were really enjoying a more gentle shower experience. But actually our findings are quite consistent with recent research from the University of Surrey, who also measured water saving shower heads, and they found that actually they can increase shower duration. So in our trial, we only saw actually a marginal increase, and so overall we did see a water reduction. But we're very conscious that actually in our trial, people had a shower timer, they were monitoring, they were constraining their shower time. Actually, if our customers don't have that sort of added tool to do that, we could end up counteracting the water saving benefits. So really going forward, our suggestion off the back of this trial would be, if we're giving customers or encouraging the take up of water saving shower heads, it would be really good to give a tool that actually gives feedback on shower time and then helps people constrain their behaviour to make sure that these tools have a really sustained impact. So our third assumption was that customers are motivated only by financial savings. And so we knew that behavioural science could shed some really, really interesting light here. In that there are so many other non-financial incentives that can actually motivate behaviour. And actually, in some circumstances, financial incentives can actually backfire. And water is very cheap as a bill compared to sort of energy and other bills. So actually for a lot of customers, the saving they might have from using less water isn't quite enough to really motivate a change in their current lifestyle. And actually also many people want to save water for purely environmental reasons. So any mention that they're saving money as a result and benefiting can actually be really off-putting. So we wanted to understand this in a bit more detail. So what we did, we tested an email that aimed to encourage our top 5%, some of our highest water users, to sign up for a water saving home visit. And this is a program that we run, a lot of other water companies do, where we have engineers that go into people's properties, speak to them about their water use, encourage behaviour change, fit products that can help reduce water usage. So we really wanted people to sign up for these visits, particularly our very high water users. And so to encourage people to sign up, we tested a range of email variants. We tested one core email as a control, which reflected our sort of standard message. So, you know, we'd like you to sign up for a water saving home visit. And then we used 4 variants for the email that used different sort of behavioural science nudges or levers. So our first measure was open rate for emails, and we found that all 4 variants actually outperformed the core message. So a real win for behavioural science, they were all having an impact. But the email variant that used virtue signalling, which is kind of appealing to people feeling good about themselves, setting an example, their sort of positive pro-social benefits, actually had the highest open rate of all the emails. And it led to the lowest number of aborted visits. So that's when the engineer turns up and nobody's actually home. And the subject line for virtue signalling was, commit to reducing your water usage and set an example for friends, family and neighbours to follow. So instead of applying a motivation that would benefit the individual in terms of sort of pound saving, we really applied to that idea of, you know, looking good, setting an example. And for number of appointments booked, which was our key measure, we found that financial motivation did have the highest appointment booking rate, but it also did lead to a high cancellation rate. And so that message using the sort of financial motivation worked well for lower income households who actually in a lot of cases were already water efficient, but maybe they had a lot of people living in the home, for example. But actually a virtue signalling message worked better for others. So we were really learning more about tailoring and what people really respond well to. And here we were looking specifically actually encouraging sign-ups for these home visit appointments, but actually the results are really interesting for engaging customers with emails in general. And actually that sort of virtue signalling approach appears to be a really good motivator for engaging customers.
Yeah, so I think another assumption was around water companies as a trusted messenger. So I think we would all feel confident in assuming that water companies are a respected authority for water scarcity messages. But I guess what if customers would respond better to another source? So we were asking ourselves, who might be the most credible messenger for water scarcity challenge? And whether a higher brand awareness could help us reach more people. But for a long time, we had no way of answering this question. During a trial with DECTEC, we were able to test how the same message would be perceived when coming from different messengers. So from a water company as a baseline, then from a government body like DEFRA, from eco authority like National Trust, and also eco celebrity, we chose Kate Winslet, a locally lives in Chichester. So I guess, yeah, the results showed that National Trust or equivalent performed strongest. And Southern Water was seen as a trusted source, but actually not encouraging or inspiring enough. And the main thing that came up there was the hypocrisy of leaks. DEFRA didn't have enough brand awareness. People really didn't know who DEFRA was and kind of didn't care. For a celebrity, there was a lot of adversity from being told what to do by someone rich. So actually that was the least performing messenger from the quiz question. But I guess celebrity is different to an influencer that speaks to a dedicated audience, but that's not something we kind of tested. So as a takeaway, we should partner with someone like National Trust. And if that's not possible, we need to make sure that we convey what we're doing on leaks to prevent backlash. And another assumption, the fifth one, was that explore the kind of, we often use asterisks to ensure that we are being transparent and factual with our message. However, actually, customers often see them as being untrustworthy and representing a catch. So it would be a lot better to portray a weaker message and remove the asterisks entirely. And that's what we did with our latest campaign. So to give you an example, rather than say can save up to X liters of water, rather than saying save exact number of water with a small print that explains it further. Yeah, so that's just to kind of summarize how you could apply our approach in practice. We outlined 7 things you can do to get started. So the first one is take stock, review and refresh the strategy. We did that by a large design sprint where we gave kind of 3 days of undistracted focus to understanding what we've done already, what we haven't yet tried, what worked and what hasn't, and what we could do differently. Then also understand what customers do, not only what they say they do. So gradually you can build evidence as your confidence in the solution grows. So going from an initial light evidence to a more concrete knowledge. So observe your customers and develop ways to objectively measure behavior change. Also speak to them, but the observation to complement is key. Third is explore multiple angles and consider all opportunities. So focus on the behavior, but break behavior down into smaller pieces, because seldom you will solve it on the first try. And then that way you can try to affect different levers of a behavior that you're trying to influence. And you can learn and adapt as you advance. Fourth is prove effectiveness in a lean way. So make the product testing quick and dirty. So gather evidence to support the building blocks of your idea. And you want to know that you're on the right path. And the fifth one is scale solution in a real world setting. So there's a big jump between brand new learnings and the final solution. So you need to know how to gradually scale it and build confidence, evidence. So an example would be moving from an insight on behavior then to ideas for how to influence it, then to knowing which levers will have or might have the highest propensity to change behavior, and then to doing A/B testing with live messages with your customer base. Sixth point is integrate solutions into standard business practice. It's really good to know how the solution will live in the business beyond validation, how it will reach customers, and who will be accountable for scaling it. Because if you don't have a kind of way to embed ideas, then you just kind of validating ideas that then have no way of reaching customers. And finally, practice epistemic humility. So we need to be aware that our knowledge is always provisional and incomplete, and that it might require revision in the light of new evidence.
Perfect. So thank you so much to our presenters so far. I think the audience will agree it's been a super engaging and interesting presentation so far. So we're just going to go to a quick break so you can all get some hot drinks, go to the toilet if you need. And then after that, we'll be coming back to hear from PlusX, Southern Water's innovation partner, for a bit more about the project from their point of view, and some learnings from Southern Water as well. So the time is now 10:46. I'll give us until 11. So if everybody could come back for 11 AM, that would be great. Thank you, everyone. Hi, everyone. Welcome back. As I said before the break, we're now going to go into a little bit from PlusX, who are Southern Water's innovation partner.
Amazing. Good morning, everybody. So my name's Ben Harrison. I'm a senior program manager at PlusX Innovation, and it's a really exciting opportunity for me to be here today to talk about some of the really interesting work we've done over the last sort of year and a half in partnership with Southern Water and the Blue Wave team, looking at sort of very complex, very interesting challenge around T100 and helping to encourage customers to use less water at home. So what do we do? You know, what's our role? So me and my team, we are essentially innovation consultants. So we work with a very broad range of large corporate customers to support them in designing and delivering their innovation strategies. So we work in a very collaborative way. So we really try to embed into our clients' businesses, understand the way they work and the way they operate, the challenges and the hurdles that they're dealing with, to help us be very effective in our role. Our work generally focuses on sort of three main things. So the first is around process. So how do we operate in an innovative way? That means we can move quickly and we can learn fast and move the needle as much as possible given the constraints around time, money, and resources. We look at problem definition and sort of strategy and internal alignment. So what really is the problem we're trying to solve? Who are the key stakeholders that we're working with? And then how do we build a very focused and cohesive strategy to help us actually deliver against solving that problem? And then the final part really is around us taking a sort of proactive role in the first steps to in implementing those solutions. So what did the projects, the work we've been doing with Southern Water actually look like? So we broke it down into sort of four main components. So the first step for us was the sprint. So this is a process where we pull together all of the key stakeholders from inside the Southern Water team to spend some time thinking about what it is that we're trying to work on, understanding all the key stakeholders' challenges and responsibilities. We then take those learnings, which then informs the sort of innovation strategy that we then build. And off the back of that, we then start to think about what the first set of solutions would look like, and then how we then actually go and test those solutions with customers. So that sprint process, we had 60 people in the room over the course of 3 days. We did lots of really interesting in-depth discussion, exploring the problem from every different angle, testing our assumptions, identifying assumptions, and then putting together what we felt were the first set of solutions that we wanted to go and explore. So once we completed the sprints, we then move into horizon scanning. So this is really a process through which we are trying to identify what the potential products that could be really effective in moving the needle to help customers use less water at home. So from our perspective, this is really about moving away from the well-trodden path. So we're out there talking to universities. So what new technologies are coming out of their PhD departments, looking at venture capital funds. So what are they investing in? We did a lot of research into sort of water scarce parts of the world like South Africa and California. So what products are those regions encouraging the people that live in those regions to use? And then we're also exploring sort of non-sector specific solutions. So are there products that are being used in defence or in manufacturing or in energy that could potentially be applied to this use case? So at the end of that process, we came up with 15 products. We ended up reviewing with the Southern Water team. And from that 15, we chose 3 that we would then pull into the sort of testing phase of the project. At the end of the horizon scan, we then went into the kind of customer discovery phase. So this is a very in-depth process where we are doing sort of one-to-one interviews we're going into customers' homes, we're taking pictures of their environment, understanding what products they're using, what they care about, what they don't care about, what are they afraid of, and where are the opportunities for us to sort of provide the right solutions in the right way, so we can see sort of high levels of adoption as we go into the pilot phase of the program. So then the final part is the actual product trials themselves. So these are small scale pilots, generally over the course of a few months, ones that we can run quickly and cheaply, that will allow us to test our assumptions about a specific product and customers' perceptions towards them. At the end of those trials, we wrote reports with our recommendations. So we're collating all the data and sort of answering the question. So what does this mean and what do we want to do next? So I wanted to go into a little bit of detail about one of the specific trials that we actually ran. So this is sort of the Gardena Smart Irrigation System. It's a really interesting product that essentially automates watering in customers' gardens using a sort of smart irrigation control unit. It's connected to an app on the user's phone, and it also uses sensors that go into the soil beds to look at like how dry or wet the soil is, and adjusts the volume and the regularity of the watering. So with this product, we designed two separate sets of trials. So we were testing with both domestic households and also commercial businesses. So these were sort of national trust type properties, and they took place over the course of 3 months, and it was split into 3 phases. So phase 1 was home visits. So we went to go and see the gardens, speak to the teams of professional gardeners, looking at the site, where the product will potentially be installed, how they are currently watering, what are the challenges they face, and what the potential problems might be with the installation and use of the product, so we could preempt those as much as possible prior to the start of the actual trial phase. The next phase was baseline testing. So we wanted to try and make sure we collected some good quality baseline data. So how much water were they using before we installed the product? So for that, we used a hose flow meter. It's basically an adapter that goes onto the tap, and it can measure how many litres of water have flown through the tap over a certain time period. And then the final part was actually the product testing phase. So we went and we gave the product to the customers. They installed it themselves. They used it for a month, and they fed back on their experience. And then we collected the data at the end of the month, the trial periods, and then we wrote up our report and analysed the results. So we learned some really interesting things. So the main one was really actually how different customers would respond to a sort of specific product. So, for example, one of the users in the domestic trial, who was a massive water consumer, they were using about 1,400 litres of water a day just in their garden. They responded fantastically to the product. They had about 60 to 70% net water reduction. Whereas actually some other users, we had one customer that was looking at really just doing hand watering. Actually, they used a little bit more water at the end of the trial. So what they found was, moving from hand watering to automated watering, they were doing quite a lot more than they normally would, and saw a sort of small increase in the net water usage they were working with. The other really big thing was understanding some of the fringe benefits of these products that were completely unrelated to how much water they were using and how much water they could save. So, for example, one of the big things that customers spoke to us about was, when we go away on holiday in the summer, we actually have to pay somebody to come in and water the plants for us. With this system, we don't have to do that. It saves us time and saves us money. The commercial gardeners, it meant that actually their gardeners weren't having to come in on a Saturday to water certain parts of the garden. It was fantastic for their PR. So they were able to talk to their customers about, we understand there's an environmental challenge with water, and here's the solutions that we're implementing to reduce our impact on the environment. So what really were some of the key learnings for us? And really this kind of comes from both our work directly with Southern Water, but also across all of our corporate innovation work. I just wanted to share some kind of key principles with you that we hope will be useful as you're kind of going into your next tranche of product testing. So the first one is define the problem and make a plan. So it's very, very common we see with our client work that sort of innovation teams are just trying to do sort of innovative things without really having a well joined up and cohesive plan that will make sure that the activity they're doing really is moving the needle towards their ultimate goal. So the value of that sprint we did with the Southern Water team was massive. So being able to sort of really define the problem very clearly, and then go into sort of designing the strategy, and that's really the base upon which everything else we did after that was built upon. Second is start with the customer. So we talked about this a lot. I think Sasha and Dorota have obviously done huge amounts of work in really trying to understand their customers in lots of detail. This is just really a process of getting as close as possible to your customers. What are their wants? What are their needs? What do they care about? Understanding the environment in which they're operating in. And that will then give you a base of sort of assumptions and information that will then help you to design product tests to test those assumptions, which you can then build upon. And then the final one is really about being lean and agile in your ways of working. So innovation can take a very long time and cost a huge amount of money. Really at the heart of our work is the lean startup methodologies and agile ways of working. So what's the smallest amount of money and the smallest amount of time that we can spend to learn some new information, which will then inform the next bigger piece of work that we do after that. And then finally, before I leave you, just a couple quick sort of pointers, I guess, benefits of working with a third party, just to kind of illustrate the role that potentially a company like ours could play in enabling some of this work. So the first one, which I think is a really big challenge and very, very common across all large organizations, is that procurement is often a very long, very expensive, very drawn out process. For a company like us being much smaller, we can procure very quickly, which can mean the difference of a trial taking months or years to complete. We can go from concept to completed trial within the course of a couple of weeks, just because we can buy and procure product very, very quickly. The second is access to customers. So there's kind of 2 points around this. One is kind of physical access. So we can go into customers' homes, engage them, ask them some challenging questions, and build up a really rich perspective on what it is they want, what they care about, and then analyze that data and turn it into a set of kind of assumptions and insights about those particular customers. I think the other key point is, which I think is probably fair to say, is that at the moment there's some particularly challenging PR environment in the water sector at the moment. And I think actually having a third party that perhaps is one step removed from the water industry gives us a much better kind of level playing field where people feel comfortable to open up to us and be honest and really engage in the process in a very productive way. And then the final part is, again, kind of 2 points. So one is a fresh pair of eyes, and the other is a sort of commercial mindset. So at PlusX, we are not specialists in any way. We're very much generalists. So we've worked with customers across FMCG, oil and gas, defence, and actually from all of those different sectors, we've seen lots of different ways of working and best practice. So when we come into a new client's business, we can pull all of those learnings from across different sectors into the projects that we deliver, and hopefully start to sort of flesh out some frameworks and best practice and good ways of working. And then the other thing is around So I talked a bit about those lean methodologies, so lean startup principles, agile ways of working. Culturally, in a smaller business, generally, it's much easier for companies to adopt and really live those processes. So for us, in terms of our capacity to move quickly and really get things done, it puts us into a very good position to add a lot of value very quickly when we come in and engage with a company like Southern Water. So that is all from me. If anybody has any questions or they'd like to connect with me directly, perhaps talk a bit about the work that we did with Southern Water in more detail, or if there's some projects you'd like to explore with us, I'm sure Sasha and the team will share my details. You can find me on LinkedIn, and yeah, look forward to speaking to you.
Yeah, so here just to summarize some of the key learnings from our kind of water efficiency program. Number one is that it kind of focuses on future readiness of the water industry. So enabling behavior change at the scale that it requires around the problem that many are disengaged around is not easy. So we need to take advantage of the opportunities to take advantage of the opportunities for behavior change, we need advanced expertise and resources. We really need to establish new programs and partnerships, as well as optimize how we do things. So to illustrate that, historic approaches to delivering water efficiency rely on home visits to hand out products, but we're missing on huge opportunities to scale to reach more customers, for example, with things like retailer partnerships. We also learned that Southern Water is not currently set on. That Southern Water is not currently set up to easily embed ideas and approaches. It can be really slow and challenging to engage new partnerships, and that affects our ability to reach customers. So in the short term, we can optimize our existing approaches, getting the right expertise in to encourage behavior change. But long term, enabling the scale of change requires major ambition and investment and different business models. Another learning is around cultural factors. So change can be difficult, and particularly for a sector that can be very risk averse. It can feel risky to try new things rather than play it safe. An example of that might be customer communications. So it can be difficult to balance messages that need to have an impact with those that customers like. So water companies currently have challenging relationships with customers, and it can be tempting to play it safe with messages, but really we need to find that sweet spot between what customers like and what works. And it's not enough to successfully deliver a message if we fail to deliver results. So in the short term, we can build evidence about what works, that behavioral science that works, and how we can make it kind of work for our customers. But it's important that we enable more agile innovation, get closer to the market, and try new things. And in the long term, we can bring in the right partners to develop content and strategy and procure technology. We can embed regular test and learn into the process.
So our third learning is around translating sort of intangible or sort of illogical concepts. So behavioral science is kind of irrational science or illogical science. It can be really difficult to explain how something really intangible or illogical can actually make a change. And as Joe said, it can be really preferable to go with a bit of a safer option. Water companies have, limited resource and budgets. We really want to avoid an intervention or a campaign kind of getting things wrong, that could come at a reputational cost too. And unfortunately, behavioural science is often seen as a bit of a novelty rather than a sort of fundamental requirement for our communications. And we believe it should be a fundamental requirement for anything involving behaviour change. But it can be really hard to get decision makers on board with how and why it works. So a bit of an example here, I recently saw this in Waitrose a little while ago, and it's basically, it uses a common heuristic whereby actually putting eyes on something makes people feel they're being watched, and actually makes people a lot more honest as a result. And I really love seeing this in practice, but I really kind of was humoured by the idea of whoever pitched this into Waitrose as a way of using behavioural science to avoid theft. So Waitrose don't actually have sort of weighted scales, which is a much better customer experience than hearing kind of unexpected item in the bagging area. So they're obviously using behavioural science to try and avoid sort of theft and make people more honest with their sort of behaviour. But yeah, I was really kind of humoured by the idea of pitching this to a stakeholder, but this stakeholder, you know, really took a risk that this could work. So in the short term, we really need to build evidence and show the difference. So, for example, we talked earlier about the kind of A/B testing of emails using behavioural science. That's one way we can actually show, you know, this is the contrast of open rates and click-throughs and engagements. So we can really show the difference between not using behavioural science and embedding it. But longer term, we really need this to become a critical discipline. And actually, other organisations that are sort of equally risk averse and regulated as we are in the water sector are beginning to embed this expertise more. So the government's a really good example of this, and also other sort of industries such as sort of finance, for example. So I think the water sector has got a long way to go, but I think there's lots of sort of exciting potential to really embed this more as a sort of way of working. So the next learning is around measuring disaggregated consumption. So Dorota spoke a little bit about this earlier, but actually when we're assessing the impact of an intervention, we need a really granular measure of change in a specific behaviour. And although before and after meter reads are one way to do this, they don't always give us the detail on that specific cause and effect. So, for example, if we're measuring an intervention on toilet flushing, for example, we could take before and after meter reads, but actually that would only tell us if that overall consumption had changed. So you might have an intervention where flushing frequency has really reduced, but perhaps somebody, you know, a child comes back from university and you've got a new person in the household adding water usage, or showering might increase, and so it disrupts the result. So actually, by using tech out there, and again, this is a flush counter by Aguardio, one of our other sort of innovation partners, but we can use tools like this and really look to innovation to say, how can we actually measure this in a disaggregated way? So we can really look at the specific impact of interventions. But actually longer term, there is a real need for more sort of enhanced technology to measure consumption in a granular way. And actually smart metering coming in is really going to provide us with a way to enhance this. We'll have so many more opportunities to kind of test and learn the different interventions. That's been really exciting. And the final learning is around timing and approach. So understanding BAU process and timelines is really essential to ensure that actually our validated ideas can then be embedded more seamlessly. So we've learned that it's really not helpful to come in with a whole load of sort of fresh ideas and excitement when actually a campaign's about to launch and people have put a lot of time and effort into it. So we need to really learn and understand what are the key points that we could actually engage with sort of BAU process and embed new ways of working. So in the short term, that's really just understanding sort of milestones and timelines and actually agreeing a handover process. So, you know, when we've got new findings, when should they be adopted? So it's not before the launch of a new campaign, but actually right at the start when we're kind of looking for new ideas and new opportunities that we can embed them. And then over the long term, actually, it's making sure that's a sort of cyclical process. And so that innovation and sort of new ways of working are really embedded into our BAU process sort of going forwards.
So just to summarize, we plotted the learnings about kind of barriers to innovation in water efficiency on a 4x4 diagram. So we wanted to reflect on how easy or difficult it is for those to kind of affect the barriers, but also to understand at which point these barriers manifest from kind of the point of idea to a proven concept. And the biggest long-term barriers, unless we obviously dedicate kind of resources to change it, will be the cultural factors and future readiness. It's so important to create the right enabling structures, and it can be done, but kind of the right capabilities, flexibility and closeness to market really take time to develop and kind of obviously require a lot of cultural change as well. But it's also moving from the kind of traditional business models and opening up to partnerships that can enable us to accommodate new service offerings. We need to kind of get much better at sustaining type of innovation, so kind of beyond efficiency type of improvements. And there will be a lot more uncertainty and moving away from kind of maybe house visits and free products as the only channel in which we kind of try to reach our customers. And I would also expect kind of some resistance to the intangible concepts, the time needed to develop that capability, just because it's also cultural. So So it's the different context to in which water kind of industry operates. It's not assets, it's not process, it's people and it's behavior, and it's messy and it's kind of irrational and counterintuitive at times. So on kind of the other barriers, measuring consumption and timing and approach both relate to how we continuously iterate to solve this challenge. So the fact that our work is always provisional, incomplete, so how we're going to organize to adapt and make the most of new findings will be very, very important. Yeah, thank you. And we can do the final poll here.
Yeah, so I think before we go to our Q&A, we've just got a couple of additional poll questions for you to answer.
Do you want to share any thoughts on the poll results, or are you happy to move into the Q&A?
Yeah, just see.
You want to give it one more minute?
Oh, yeah, we'll give it a couple more minutes just to give people a chance to respond.
No problem.
So yeah, please do pop questions in the chat for us. We've got a little bit of time now to answer any questions you have. So yeah, please feel free to share.
Shall I go back to number 1?
We have got 39 responses, so there you go.
Any more final clicks?
Perfect. Okay. Do you want to share any reflections on that, or do you want to go into the Q&A?
Yeah, I think we're happy to go to Q&A, but I mean, as always, any questions that you think of after today, really happy to answer. Please do get in touch with us. We love talking about this stuff. So please do reach out to us. We're really, really happy to share our learnings, and particularly with others in the sector too.
Okay, well, perfect. Thank you to our presenters for, again, a really great presentation. We'll now be going into the Q&A section, so you can all come and join me up here. I'm going to stop sharing the screen just so we can see a bit more of our lovely presenters during this session. Okay, perfect. As I say, while you listen to the Q&A session, please do feel free to keep putting more questions in the chat. Okay, so first up from Sarah, to what extent can your learning be applied to customers in other regions?
I guess I think it depends. I think a lot of the learnings will be shared across kind of all of UK. So when we did the studies with DECTEC, we had a nationally representative sample, but a lot of the ethnography was specific to kind of our region as well. So I think the kind of, we can assume the kind of main principles will stand, but I would also expect to be some regional differences.
I think that's kind of what we're starting to have to learn, especially in the anticipation of the SMART programme and sort of smart metering and all of, we're expecting that to drive in terms of consumption reduction. To what extent do the variables affect behaviour? So some of that might be regionality, but also seasonality obviously is a big factor, and maybe even life stage as well. So I think it's understanding what the variables are, regionality maybe being one of them, but then understanding to what extent those variables actually affect behaviour, which we'll only learn through more of the work that we've been doing.
I think just an understanding of who your customers are in the first instance will help guide some of that. There's some really interesting learnings going on in the sector around sort of different cultural or religious groups that might need a slightly different level of understanding, and also thinking about other regions. You know, different areas of the UK have different sort of awareness and need for, or difference in water scarcity, really. So the southeast is experiencing a lot more, whereas the northeast might not understand the need for saving water. It might rain a little bit more. So yeah, I think there's real differences in terms just within the UK, but a lot more nuanced, I think, in terms of sharing those learnings with the sector.
Absolutely. Perfect. So next question from Jez is, are other companies carrying out similar research, and has there been any sort of collaboration in terms of planning and results findings and sharing?
Yes, there is actually, yes, there is a fantastic sector group. I can give them a shout out. By CCW, the Consumer Council for Water, which is set up to enable sort of sharing of behaviour change programme learnings with different water companies. So that's a really fantastic group. So there are sort of things starting to be set up to enable us to do that. We also have quite, I guess, an organic relationship with some water companies around just sharing those learnings. I know with Northumbrian Water we speak to a lot. So yeah, I think we could do a lot more to sort of share learnings across the sector. It's just setting those groups up, but it's starting to happen organically, which is really great.
Perfect, amazing. And a question from Jez. Any other companies? Oh, sorry, no, we've already. A question from Eleanor. So, will this research be publicly published, and if so, when? It's very interesting.
So we'll be publishing the case study.
Yes,
but
of
I
course,
think
yeah.
for we're not, and we're also potentially presenting some further insights at a kind of behavioural conference in the autumn, but we're not planning on publishing kind of the specifics.
Yeah.
Obviously happy to discuss some of the findings. If anyone has questions, we're always open to meeting. But I think, yeah, it's that sort of channel for how we can share learnings.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I guess the openness to kind of, it's even in like terms and conditions of the research, like the price you pay for research when you specified that it's only for your benefits from the research agencies, that also plays a part.
I think it's worth highlighting as well the kind of water efficiency fund that Ofwat have published a consultation on recently for AMP8. So I think that's a really exciting additional platform for this area of kind of emerging expertise and the importance of knowing more about our customers and enhancing all interventions, not just communication through behavioural science. I think that will be another platform to sort of do that at a sector level and start to connect a lot of the kind of small pockets of interest that exist at the moment.
Yeah, absolutely. And as I say, we will be posting the case study as well alongside the showcase recording, so you'll get to see some written facts and figures in that as well. Okay, so next question is from Marcin, who wants to know, isn't this more a function of the price elasticity of water during customers are only motivated by money?
Yes, I think this might have been the sort of example we gave around motivating customers in different ways. So some being motivated more by financial motivation, others being a bit more sort of virtue signalling or other sort of measures. Again, we talked about the fact that, you know, water is a relatively inexpensive bill compared to others, so that has an impact. I think really it's more around the fact that we need to understand customers better and ask more questions. So we keep needing to dig further into this really, and it's a really important one to know in more detail. There are some customers who, you know, particularly the people that are maybe higher income households, that just they will be happy to pay more for more water. So they'll say, actually, do you know what, if it's going to cost me a few more £100 a year, I'm quite happy to keep using more water. So actually some of those other motivations are much better to I guess try and tap into, which is, you know, what would work for you if maybe the financial side of it isn't that all that valuable to you, what might work, what might make you, maybe it's a pride or a pro-social side of things. There's actually a really interesting sort of behavioural science example here, which is there was a study in nurseries where they found that parents were late picking their children up from nursery quite often. So the nursery actually brought in a fine for doing this, and what then happened is so many more people started being later to pick their children up from nursery, because what then happened is, whereas in the first instance they were trying not to make people late and sort of wait around looking after their children, what they then did was go, well, actually I'm paying for this now, I'll quite happily take my time and, you know, work a little bit later, arrive a bit later, you know, I'll pay for that privilege. So we need to be really, really careful that we're not, I guess, giving people an opportunity just to say, oh, water's not that precious, I'll just pay a bit extra for it. So it's getting it right and really understanding, you know, the financial side of that motivation as well.
I think just to build on that as well, we know that tariffs, so sort of pricing water at different levels of expense depending on consumption amount. We know that that's happening across the world. I think the most recent example was Lyon in France. So I think it's important to look at tariffs and cost as a behavioural lever in itself. So it is a financial incentive to use less or use more. And I think, again, the devil is in the detail, right? So it depends on the customer, but we'll need to do testing around those tariffs, because we know that actually most financial incentives aren't effective. And sometimes if they're not tested, they can actually have the adverse effect they can exactly as Sasha sort of
Yeah.
demonstrates in the nursery example.
Absolutely, that's great, thank you. And Louis just wanted to add, I may have missed a point as I had to step away. Do you look at segmentation? Is all your understanding driven solely through ethnographic and survey?
We had some we used segmentation to kind of narrow down the scope of where we thought we could have the biggest impact, and that was young families and kind of like older, more affluent couples that still really had like that kind of a strong environmental consciousness element, but they were still high users of water. But then in the kind of behavioral testing, we also focused on kind of really affecting the specific behavior. So the segmentation was used to help us understand a specific group of customers, because we couldn't possibly understand everyone in one go.
Of course.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think it's about the assumption side of it as well. It's really need those segments, but actually not just assuming we know things about those segments that we don't yet know. So it really helps us to guide. I think it's just the complexity that's needed to understand behaviour and behaviour change is just probably greater than we anticipated even. And I think it's a very, very complex challenge.
Yeah.
So we really need to throw more at it to really understand that in more detail.
And I guess we also we kind of focused on people that were open to change. So the kind of segments that were resistant, not kind of even entertaining the idea of kind of using less water, we didn't focus on them.
Yes, it was a lot about attitudes.
Yeah, absolutely, that makes sense. Stuart wants to know, have you had any success comparing data from devices like flush counting devices against the flow logging of customer properties? Does it tally up, or are there inherent errors that creep in?
The answer is no. Definitely one to consider further. Yeah, I think innovation and new devices are a really good way of just learning a lot more about that, and we're starting to really break that down. So yeah, absolutely. We'll follow up on that one.
Perfect. So Sarah wants to know, I'd be interested to hear more about the intangible concepts. The example with the eye is good, but what examples did you find in your research?
So many, it's difficult to think. Yeah, I guess one example, maybe not as intangible, was kind of the idea of sort of loss aversion, which is that sort of behavioural science says that we basically fear losses more than we fear gains. So actually losing an amount of money, for example, if we lost only £20 out of our pocket, we'd feel the loss of that and we'd be more gutted basically than we would benefit from gaining that amount of money. So when we were talking about that and how we convey sort of some of the financial benefits of water saving to customers, there was an idea from one of our partners that actually, rather than saying save £30 a year by using your washing machine less, we could actually appeal to that. You're losing that, you're throwing it down the drain. And again, it was a really interesting one because it makes sense and it would be, a really bold, interesting thing to do. And I'm sure it would gather attention and it might have an impact. But again, as a sector we are risk averse, we don't want to upset customers or, say the wrong thing. I guess that was a bit of an example where we felt like it would probably work. It would be really interesting. Are we quite ready to go down that route? Maybe not yet. But yeah, there's probably so many examples of just bringing them to mind.
Yeah, and I think some of them a bit, as you said, Sasha, I think so much of this is about sort of small tweaks and nuances in language, which can feel almost too small to maybe have a disproportionately big effect on behaviour and perception. But I think that's the power of this approach. And actually, even in a conversation that we had last week with a lady that works in government, she was sharing their approach to behaviour change. And we were talking about flushing and water consumption through the toilet. And she didn't know that we use the same source of water. So it's drinking water standard that comes through your toilet. And so it's sort of those small things that we take for granted as a sector and we think is so obvious and understood. And actually do people know? Is that a way that we might be able to encourage less flushing or reduce flushing as a huge kind of source of water consumption in the home by knowing that actually that's really precious drinking water, not toilet water, which maybe is perceived as something different.
I think another kind of really good example that's kind of out of industry example was kind of that making behavior really difficult might help people to adopt the more desired behavior. So that was an example of getting people to use the stairs rather than lifts, and they tried different things like signage, messaging, but what actually worked best was making the door close really, really slowly. and
Oh,
people literally gave up waiting for the door to close.
Oh, brilliant.
How can we do something like that? I don't know.
Yeah.
Being
Amazing.
creative.
Yeah, absolutely. Amazing. And just another question from Sarah. There is a big assumption that customers in, for example, Yorkshire, are somehow different to those in other areas. I just wondered how receptive you feel. Oh, that's a different question. Yeah.
I'd love to know more about that. Yeah, what's the difference?
Sarah, if you want to pop the rest of your question in the chat, we will try and answer that for you. In the meantime, I'll move on to the question from Henry.
I was just going to say, actually, we probably can just speak to that, and Ben might be able to speak to that too, because that is about being specific about your assumptions.
Yeah.
So we've probably faced this all the time, just these kind of sweeping broad statements, and actually you need to make space and time to dig into the detail. So why do we think that customers in Yorkshire are different? In what way do we think that they're different? And why would that be distinct from other parts of the UK? What is it about our region, or our relationship with the water company, or I don't know, that kind of regional bias, like specifically what? And it's only when you get down to that level of specific assumption that you can then start to test them.
Based on that, do you see kind of a way for water companies to all kind of collectively work together on something like this? And
I think Water Efficiency Fund is kind of planning to start that sort of approach.
Yeah.
And it's really needed. Yeah.
It's really
neat, absolutely.
But I think it's like bringing it all together, and really the analysis of the nuance that really plays a big part.
Yeah, absolutely. Perfect. Thank you, guys. So a question from Henry is, I just wondered how receptive you feel to the regulators. I just wondered how receptive you feel the regulators are to these kind of insights, wondering how it might shape their thinking when it comes to improving business plans.
Big one above my face. Or again, sort of not to speak over the team, but we as a team have worked quite closely with Mark Hannis and the team at Ofwat around the Water Innovation Fund, and we had a conversation with Jonathan Dennis, who is kind of leading on the design of the Water Efficiency Fund. So that there's definitely, I can't speak for the whole of Ofwat as a regulator, not all, but there's definitely a receptivity, I think, of different ways of doing. And again, because of the challenges of the next AMP, we're just going to need lots of different approaches and lots of different new ways of working that are going to feel quite scary and take a lot of bravery and leadership to pursue. But if we do it through this kind of lean testing model, it shouldn't be so scary, because we will have the evidence to prove that it works or it doesn't.
Absolutely.
I think we've seen I've definitely seen, I've been in the sector now for 5 years, and I've seen such a shift in going from sort of like asset management companies to really sort of customer focused. So I think there's already been a huge shift, and I definitely am seeing more sort of awareness of kind of customer behaviour, and that being really important, and really sort of knowing our customers in detail. So I think it's definitely shifting. And again, my experience with CCW in particular, representing the customers, they're really on board with this. They really want us to be embedding more behavioural science, and they often have the same view. So yeah, it's definitely shifting, and I think they're definitely on board. It's just explaining why this adds value. And I think that's one of the challenges when we talk about things like, the intangible concepts, is trying to explain that and having to get that evidence to really show that value is part of the challenge as well.
I think maybe one other thing to add is sort of, it's where we need to have more faith in kind of the process, not necessarily a specific solution, which I think is a huge cultural shift for the industry. So with this, you can't assess the need, design the solution, build it, and it will, it's something that we can then maintain, and it will perform over a certain amount of years. It's much more volatile than that. So it is a more process driven, test, learn, iterate. So it's a completely different way of working. It is more agile, and so for price reviews and things like that, it will probably present a slight challenge, but something that I think the sector needs to lean into.
Yeah,
because it's also the balance around kind of increasing awareness through kind of broad national campaigns or individual campaigns, and I guess the balance of how much do we focus on awareness versus how much do we focus on affecting individual behaviors, and I don't know the answer.
Absolutely. No, that makes sense. Then it may just be one for you. I think Martin was just asking, how would you consider the sort of ethical implications of this type of research?
I mean, I guess I can draw from my experience kind of outside of the water sector.
Yeah.
I would say customer discovery, customer research, particularly in industries like fast-moving consumer goods, is absolute bedrock of like how those businesses operate. And I guess kind of from being outside the water sector, I've really encouraged just to get comfortable, really engaging with customers, asking them questions about how they are, how they feel, what they want, how you can serve them as a supplier. I think yes, it's very, very important about managing data correctly. We always anonymize everything that we work with and store securely, and we have process around that, but it's fairly straightforward. You know, it's not rocket science. I think with some basic kind of planning and thought about, okay, here's what we want to collect, here's how we're going to analyze it, and here's how we're going to store it. They're the kind of 3 questions that you want to be asking. But you know, start the process is kind of what I would say. Get comfortable doing it, and the more you do it, the more you'll learn. And yeah, that process around, is it ethical? Yes.
Yeah.
Customers expect it. It will help you to be better at doing your job, basically.
And I think just on the other side of the ethnography work, we obviously did not go into customer homes without their permission. These were, and again, it's an expert agency that we work with, BVA BDRC, so that they do this stuff all the time. So they engaged a group of customers. The customers were incentivized as well, and they knew they were taking part. They were welcoming us inside their homes and showing us their homes. So it wasn't a case of, you know, anything was sort of covert. It was more of a, they were just we were just getting a lot more granularity into how do people live, rather than us sitting in a room and thinking, I wonder what, you know, people do in their homes, or so we were actually seeing that. So yeah, I think it's something really important to consider, and again, it's also the value, I think, of those expert partners that can help us do that and make sure we're meeting standards.
And again, as we become more mature in our application of behavioural science and within the behavioural science community that we've been tapping into and sort of working really closely with on some of these projects, like the ethics of decision making and choice, I mean, it's again sort of a foundational conversation that underpins their whole discipline, because it can be quite controversial. So the example recently of Rishi Sunak and sort of delaying the age of buying cigarettes to sort of eventually eradicate that choice completely, like it is an ethical question, and so I think we are like very sensitive to that, but it is about enabling choice but kind of guiding it effectively, basically.
Perfect, amazing. And did you find that sort of like transparency with the customer about the whole process, kind of keep reminding them why you're collecting that data and what you're going to do with it, sort of thing?
We really want that honesty. It's no use to us if a customer tells us, yeah, I'd take that product and I'd use it. That's not of value to us, really. We want to understand, would you really, and be really honest, because if not, we'll switch to a different solution and we'll invest in something different. So yeah, it is really useful to get that kind of honest feedback, I think, as we go through. Yes, absolutely.
Actually, it's interesting that you said that about kind of trust. Like, I think actually with Smart and everything that is going to be happening with that necessary engagement with customers, I see it as a massive opportunity to sort of shift the relationship between water companies as it stands now and kind of water company relationships with customers in the future. So I think we should embrace it as a platform.
Absolutely. Perfect. Amazing. And then another question from Louis is, do you think the way to think is toward personal consumption / usage?
Personal consumption / usage?
Personalised.
Do you think the way to think is toward personal consumption / usage?
Well, we do measure a kind of consumption per years. I think.
It's not
So household.
Household consumption.
Usually tailored. Okay, amazing. Okay, perfect. That's perfect. So one from me is, how can the sector access behavioural science experts?
We can share learnings, but I think it's really important to look at sort of who, I guess, to look for partners really, and kind of engage with the water companies, find out who other people have worked with. I think we can kind of share those learnings, and also the sort of water efficiency fund is hopefully going to do a lot more of that. So yeah, I think it's working with the right partners and kind of sharing who's had sort of good experience in the sector and who are the right people, because again, and different agencies do different things as well. You know, it's such a broad sort of subject area that there's so many different things you can look at. So you'll see we kind of work with DecTech, we want to do the sort of message side of things, and other organisations do something slightly different. So it's really getting the right partners to do the right things, I think, as well.
Also, it's such it is actually quite an emerging like discipline in itself. So the science, the science is like our research and our understanding of behaviour and psychology. I think a lot of best practice seems to be quite mixed methods. So taking like psychology or kind of psychological principles, but also behavioural science, understanding heuristics and biases. But it is actually quite a creative thing that kind of pursue, I think, because actually even when you understand the psychology and what bias may be that you need to tap into, how you do that, the execution of it is sort of so important. So that's where again, like partnerships and kind of testing different execution, because actually, again, the subtle things can make a huge difference. Is sort of going to be key.
Absolutely, there's no one size fits all, unfortunately.
And what do you kind of see the next steps for this project being? Are you planning to go out there and continue the research? Are you now in an analysing stage of the stuff that you found, or?
Continuous process, definitely, yeah. And it's working with our sort of wider programme team to actually look at the sort of BAU activities. How can we embed this into that, so into our sort of campaigns, into where we communicate, and I think scaling it up as well. The idea is that once we kind of test and sort of de-risk things on a smaller scale, we can then sort of scale that a bit more live. So we kind of reducing the risk as we go, really, by kind of testing in sort of a more artificial environment and then sort of more live with customers. There's so much more we could do. I think we really are sort of scratching the surface, but it's just making that practice, I think, and actually building that into our process, and actually sort of working through this process and understanding what don't we know, how can we find that out, finding it out, handing those learnings over. So as Storage talked about earlier, you know, we can actually embed that. You know, it's no use to this research if we're not going to use it as a next step. So
absolutely. So do you see this kind of research becoming almost like business as usual for sort of water?
I think the approach will, and again, our learnings of what works, we should be embedding that into practice. So now we know, for example, which sort of nudges or levers might work in an email. We absolutely should be scaling that up because it works, and we want more customers to sign up for a home visit or engage with sort of water efficiency activity. But I think it's being aware that this is a constantly iterative process. What works one time might not work in future, so it's kind of adapting that as we go. So I think it's embedding the process and the sort of specialism and the approach, but sort of changing that up as we go along.
I guess it's just like reviewing the strategy kind of maybe yearly, just having that I guess top-down view on like what worked, what didn't, and what we need to do next. So like if we explored bathrooms, maybe we kind of like tried certain types of products. Is there more we want to do in the bathrooms, or do we need to maybe focus on like let's say water baths? If it was an opportunity we identified originally in the research, and we know it's an opportunity, but maybe we don't know enough about like how we could influence it, then we could commission some more research to really understand the levers and barriers and then design solutions from that. So it's like the kind of balance of like what sort of like problem areas are we focusing on, and what have we tried, and what else do we need to try.
Good data is really important there as well, actually knowing what are the biggest challenge, what are the biggest opportunities, really based on, you know, what's the highest user of water, for example, and actually trying to target that. So it's being smart with new information, I think, is a general sort of theme.
I think just one more addition as well. One of the kind of key themes or sort of areas of focus for the water sector strategy, the innovation strategy, is around kind of future workforce and like future capabilities that are essential for the sector. And like for me, this is one of them. We've talked today about how you use behavioural science to design for behaviour change in reducing consumption, but there's such broad application here. Like blockages is one that we've looked at, sort of only slightly internally, but blockages is huge. That's all about behaviour change. And then there's, you know, a lot of behaviour change teams that exist in different sectors that actually take an internal focus. So think about behaviour change amongst their colleagues. And so we can think about it within sort of the operational workforce as well. So how you more effectively have kind of digital solutions adopted in operations. But again, that's about really understanding the details of their day, what they're dealing with, you know, emotionally, in terms of like workload as well. So it is about designing based on insight, but in pursuit of that behaviour change. So I think the application is huge if the sector is kind of willing to sort of really adopt it.
Absolutely. I think you might have already touched on this in your answers, but Jo just wanted to ask, is it important to not consider this as a static approach, that as a society changes, the methodology will change?
Yeah, and again, we talked a bit earlier about kind of epistemic humility, and I guess just being conscious that, you know, if we find a better way in future, that's fine. We don't have to cling on to that, you know, thing that we did once that worked really well. You know, we can constantly adapt, and I think it's just being humble about that, and just kind of being open to new ideas and ways of working is got to be the way to go.
Absolutely.
So I guess Plastics kind of like offered at one point the kind of periodical horizon scanning is one way of like keeping kind of like tabs on the market.
Oh, okay. Absolutely. Ben, would you have any advice for sort of a general audience that are looking to set up a project like this, or from the supplier's point of view?
Yeah, I think the key thing is really around, we touched on this before, it's around process, right? So no matter what the context, how you set up and design these processes is really, really important. I think, as I say, I kind of sort of touched on it, really. It's like, what is the question you're trying to answer? And what are the steps we need to take to answer that question fairly effectively? And then what are the potential solutions that we can come to offer, and then put together small, cheap tests to if you do something with 3 customers, that will give you a huge amount of information to then go, okay, now we've got 100, 1,000 or 10,000 customers.
So you can start really small then.
I think that the smaller the better, really. You know, there's probably like there is possibly a limit, but like with the Gardena trial, we did that with 3 domestic households and 3 commercial properties. So very easy for us to manage. We can really deep dive into what those customers cared about, what those people were interested in, and then you build a sort of foundation of, okay, well, is there something here that's then worth exploring in more detail?
For ethnography also, we had a sample of kind of like 12 to 15 people. And we had 2 segments within that, so it was about kind of 6 people for each of the segments, so also quite small.
I think again that's going to be it's a cultural transition for the sector, where of course in a kind of wastewater and water processing environment where you're testing solutions, you might need, you know, multiple years and seasonality to feel confident about the kind of efficacy of that solution. In a customer environment, totally different ballgame. So I think it is about working back from your assumptions base. What are the most important things to test that will fundamentally make or break this solution, and your willingness to invest at a kind of adopted scale level, and then designing according to that to get some answers. But again, a lot of this is down to risk appetite as well.
Perfect.
And I think just one final point, it's like the lean startup principles, agile methodology. Let's just Google it. There's tons of really interesting information as a set of principles for how you design and run projects. They're very beautifully simple, and will give you a really good starter for 10 in terms of how do you operate as an innovation team.
Perfect. Amazing. I think we might just have time for one more quick question. How will we ensure approaches will lead to sustainable change based off of this?
The word sustainable is interesting.
I think continuing to measure and adapt, again, kind of keeping up to date with you know, testing our assumptions again, really. I think understanding what reduces barriers initially will help things to become something we can adopt initially. And then I guess it's just continuing to be aware of, you know, are we being reasonable with what we're asking our customers to do? Are we keeping up with the market on? And again, we were looking in this sort of project with what sort of solutions are more customer centric as well. So kind of thinking about what would really excite and engage customers in this challenge. So I think it's really just being very sort of customer centric and focused on what do people actually want to be using right now, and just sort of adapting to it as we go.
And I think although it might seem overwhelming because of the nuance and like the complexity in that way, and the fact that you can't just build it and they will come, or build it and it will solve the problem for years. we should draw a lot of confidence from where this approach has been applied across really challenging problems like smoking.
Yeah.
You know, like highly addictive, emotionally driven like behaviors and habits and habit forming, and it's understanding like how you form those habits and how we can then help our customers form more positive habits that help address our performance commitments but also then benefit the environment. That's what we're sort of all seeking. So yeah, it might seem overwhelming because it's new, but it's being applied in thousands of places, so we should just look for inspiration there.
So I would also hope that we can build momentum as we kind of learn more and develop kind of like a range of solutions. We will have enough solutions that work for different types of behaviors, different types of people, that we can actually kind of like see increased impact.
Yeah.
Amazing. Perfect. Sasha, do you have anything you wanted to add? Or
No?
No? Perfect.
Just thank you for having us.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you for being here. Thank you for all the hard work you put into the presentation. That does bring us to the end of our session today. So again, thank you all for the hard work you have done to put this presentation together today. Thank you also to the audience who have taken time out of their day to join us. My colleague Kira has just popped a poll into the chat. So if everybody could just take a second to answer that poll, it really helps us shape our showcases as we move forward and ensure that they're really valuable for our audience. Any questions that do get answered today will go up with the case study along with the showcase recording, and we'll aim to upload that within a week of today's event. So keep an eye on the Spring LinkedIn and our Spring Plan platform too. That's where it'll be uploaded. Perfect. So yeah, have a lovely rest of the day, everybody, and we'll see you all soon. Thank you.